Kane, DM2 Software's Vice President of Sales and Marketing. I would like to welcome everyone to today's Equipment Manager webinar. Before I introduce today's presenter, I'd like to go over a few housekeeping items. Because of the number of attendees we have on today's webinar, everyone's phones will stay on mute. If you have any questions during the webinar, please enter them into the question window that you see in the lower right of your screen. We'll try to answer everyone's questions at the end of the webinar. If we're unable to get to everyone's questions, we'll follow up with you individually after the webinar. Today's webinar is being recorded. As soon as the recording is available, we will post it on the customer content page of our website and send you an email to let you know when it's available to be downloaded. On that note, I would like to introduce DM2 Professional Service Consultant Lisa Thiele to give you an overview of how our Equipment Manager module can help you to easily track and report on your loaned leased equipment to ensure your customers are meeting their commitments. Take it away, Lisa.
Good afternoon, everybody. Here's the agenda for today's webinar, the 5 topics that we will cover today. Do you know? What does Equipment Manager do? The reporting, some things to consider, and then we'll have, as Tom says, questions. You invest a significant amount of capital in equipment, providing a service to your customers, loaning them equipment as part of a volume purchase agreement. You might loan a car dealership tanks, hoses, etc. for their fuel and lubricants, or maybe an oil rig. In return, they agree to purchase a certain amount of product over a specified period of time. You might have hundreds of pieces of equipment loaned out. In our area of Texas, with all of the oil and gas drilling that is going on, there are diesel and lubricant tanks scattered everywhere, and the rigs are constantly moving. So, do you know? Or maybe the better question is do you know what you don't know? Do you know where your equipment is? Is that tank at a customer's location, or is it in your yard? Have you ever been driving and run across one of your tanks in a place that you didn't expect it to be? This was a pet peeve of the man that I used to work for before I came to work at DM2. He'd be driving out and drive by a pasture somewhere, and there was a tank. Are your salesmen and maintenance folks telling you when they place or move a tank? Are you losing equipment because no one is tracking deliveries to it? These are all complaints that over the years we have heard. Do you know if your customers are meeting their agreements? The salesman talks the customer into buying the product if you supply the tank. And they have said that they will buy X number of gallons. But are they? You have some expensive equipment at their location and you need a decent ROI. The salesman might have been overly optimistic, or the customer may not be buying what they said they would for whatever reason. And one of those reasons might be, do you know if your customers are using your equipment but are buying the fuel or lubes from someone else? If you aren't tracking your deliveries to the equipment, how can you know? Do you know how many times a tank has been serviced? Do you know where your equipment has been? How many gallons have gone through it? You might want to know this over the life of the equipment, across customers and agreements. So the tank might move from customer to customer to customer, and you would like to know where it's been, what all has been put in it, what you've had to do to it as far as service is concerned, and just general information like that. The equipment transaction history will let you know all of this information. Do you want a document outlining the details of the agreement? Equipment Manager can take a Word document template with all of the legal boilerplate you might need, insert the details of the agreement, and prepare a form to submit to your customer. Do you want the ROI on your loaned equipment? Equipment Manager has a performance report that tells you by period the quantity purchased, the sales dollars, the gross profit dollars, the gross profit percentage, the expected monthly purchase based on the number of gallons you put in for the life of the agreement, and the variance between those expected gallons and the actual gallons. When setting up the agreement, you can record the purchase cost. With the purchase cost of the equipment and the gross profit dollars on the equipment, you can determine your ROI. So what does Equipment Manager do? Or how can it help you find out the things that you don't know? Equipment Manager creates a database that relates your agreement with your customer to the equipment you have loaned them and the product that they purchase as part of that agreement. It tracks this information through the life of the agreement. It tracks your equipment, your cost, the throughput, and the sales dollars. It tracks the agreements with your customers, where the equipment is located, what products are being purchased, and how much. As you keep up with all of this within Equipment Manager, you will have records by the equipment and by the agreement that you can use to analyze to your heart's content as to what is going on with your equipment. With the AP invoice interface, you can streamline your data entry and add new equipment from within accounts payable. From the AP invoice header screen, when you click on the equipment button, you can enter in your new equipment's number, cost, and purchase date. So here you see the equipment number that I assigned to a particular tank and the unit cost. When I enter the equipment number, if it's a new number, it will take you to the serialized equipment screen. All of the dates in this screen will default to the AP invoice date. Your AP person could enter all of the pertinent details, or if you have Sage alerts, an email could be sent whenever an invoice is entered for the equipment vendor to your Equipment Manager person, so they could go into the equipment, verify the information, and add any additional information that they require. If you're using a yard agreement to track what is in your yard, it can be added to the agreement at this time. As you can see here, when I entered in the tank, I put in an agreement number and an install date. This particular agreement is tracking all of the equipment that I have sitting in my yard. And here's the equipment, the agreement that I set up for that. If you won't use the AP interface, again, you can still use Sage Alerts to alert the Equipment Manager person when an invoice for the vendor is entered, prompting them to make sure they got information required for data entry. How many times have you received equipment and the person who's responsible for setting up the tracking doesn't know anything about it? With Sage Alerts, you can set up an alert that says that when we get an invoice entered for this particular vendor or set of vendors, then we need to email the Equipment Manager person, and he can check to see if those invoices are for any new equipment. We can track, or you can, if you decide to set it up this way, you can track what you have in the yard ready to be replaced by setting up an agreement for each of the plant locations that might hold equipment that has not yet been placed at a customer location. Using the proper dates, you can see when it was, quote unquote, installed at the yard. Here is the equipment screen for the agreement, and here are the pieces of equipment that I've assigned to that particular agreement. The transaction tab on the agreement shows that same information. What this does is that it will allow you to print out an equipment listing by agreement. So we can print out a listing for our equipment at the main warehouse agreement, hand it over to somebody, and they can go out and check, make sure that what you say is in the yard is still really in the yard. You track your equipment when it leaves the yard, and you do that by removing it from the yard agreement, placing it on the customer's agreement, and you now have a trail to follow of where the equipment has been and where it should be currently. As the transactions begin flowing through, you will also see them as well. So here is my yard agreement, and you can see where I have removed 3 pieces of equipment from the yard, and I have assigned them to a customer's agreement. So it is showing the fact that these 3 pieces of equipment were originally placed in the yard on March the 1st, and then on March the 6th, I placed them at a customer's location and added them to the customer's agreement. We can also see what happens based on the equipment record. So here is the equipment record for my tank, and you can see that it was installed in the yard, then it was removed from the yard, and now it was installed to customer number 1 on their agreement number 1. In addition, your customer service representative can quickly see a customer's agreement from within the AR customer inquiry. If they're in inquiry, you will see an agreements button there. And when you click on it, this little screen appears showing by ship to and by agreement number what equipment is actually installed at that particular ship to based on the agreement. I guess probably the most important question that you want answered is, are your customers, aside from knowing where the equipment is are your customers meeting their agreements, or are they buying products from another distributor? You can spot check this by looking at the agreement itself. On the Additional tab, you can see period to date transactions, the year to date, and the life to date of the agreement. Or you can run a performance report. And we'll be looking at this several different times during the presentation, but basically what you see here is the performance on our agreement number 1 to Brown Trucking. You can see that they were going gangbusters the first month in period 3, fell off period 4, and fell off some more in period 5. Well, is that because they're just not using it, or are they buying the product from someone else? Now, as I said, if you want to see what has gone on with the equipment, you can go into the equipment itself. Now, here you see, after we installed the tank at our Brown Trucking, I wanted to see what has actually occurred. So I can go into the equipment record and see where it's been installed and removed, what sales have gone through it, whether or not it has been serviced. You can see the equipment's note field to record what was done. In this particular case, this poor little nozzle got left in a vehicle, and the vehicle drove off. It was pulled from the hose, and then it was run over, and it was ruined. So I can make that note here on the equipment note field, or I can go into a memo for that particular piece of equipment and do it there. Then, as I will show you later on when we look at the reporting, you can print an equipment listing showing the notes or the memos, or you can print a memo listing specifically for your service memos to look at just the equipment that has been serviced. You want to see the agreements activity. You can go into the agreement record and see all of its activity. This particular agreement has several pieces of equipment associated with it, and each piece of equipment shows the gallons that have gone through it. You'll notice that the service call also shows up on all of the equipment, which is why I used a memo on the agreement to detail what service had been done. This is my agreement memo. I also have a memo, as I showed you, on the specific piece of equipment that was serviced, so we can track that, just as we saw a second ago. We talked about needing a printed agreement for your document for your customer to sign. With a Word document using a set of merge fields, from the agreement you can create a document which can then be modified, saved, and printed. So I'm going to show you how that works. I'm going to go into my agreement. And you can see that there is an agreement document here. If you have one agreement for fuels and another for lubes or whatever, or maybe different terms, different whatever to the contracts, you can have multiple types of agreements to choose from. The only caveat is that it needs to start with AG, I believe, at the beginning of the document name. When you click on Print Agreement, it opens up Word. It pulls in those fields, the customer name and address, the ship to name and address, the date of the agreement, the name of the customer. It shows the end date of the agreement. It shows the number of gallons they agreed to purchase over the life of the agreement. And if you set up a penalty, if they don't meet their contracted gallons for a month, then you could charge them a penalty fee for that month. This particular agreement also lists out the equipment that has been assigned to it, lists it by type, lists it by my serial number, and gives it a description. Because it opens up in Word, you can do things like fix incorrect spelling, get rid of these extra zeros in the penalty price, and maybe get rid of these extra spaces here so where it looks like it was really typed and not a merge field. At this point, if it's ready to go and you don't need to add anything more, you can save as, and save it as whatever you want it to be, wherever you need it to be. You just want it to save as something other than the agreement document, and save it. And now it's ready to be printed out and signed by you and your customer. What is your ROI on your equipment? You have all the information that you need to calculate the ROI. With the performance report and the equipment cost, you can easily see it. Notice that the performance report has the equipment listed on it. The cost isn't there, but it can easily be added as the performance report is a crystal report. For those of you that might have an older version of Equipment Manager, it was not a crystal report. It became a crystal report in 4.4. And because it became a crystal report, I was able to add the product that the agreement is for, as well as the equipment that has been assigned to the agreement. I actually did this for one of our other clients. It was so well received by them that I presented it to our development team, and they added it to the standard crystal report. The cost, because I entered the cost of the hose, the nozzle, and the tank on the equipment record, it would be just simply a matter of adding the cost to this particular section of the report. Okay, reporting. First thing that we have is the equipment listing. It can be sorted by the equipment number, the equipment type, or by the vendor. You can insert a page break at a change in whatever you are sorting by. And you can include the notes or the memos. So, if I wanted to do an equipment report, I would tell it how I would want it sorted. I'm just going to leave this particular one sorting by the equipment number. And the reason I am able to do that is because of the way that I numbered my equipment. I gave it a number to where the equipment type is actually part of the name, as well as assign an equipment type so that I could sort it that way as well. And as you can see here, it reports simply what was set up on the piece of equipment. We can see when we bought it, when it should be next inspected, when is its anniversary date, what is the manufacturer date. Here's my cost, and here's the number of units that have gone through it so far. If you wanted to track when it needed to be serviced, the next service, you could choose that to use the next inspection date could be your next service date, while the service date could show the actual date that it was last serviced. If I tell it to print with the notes and with the memos, it adds the notes and the memo to the report. This first listing here comes from the notes section of the equipment record, and then this section here is the memo that has been assigned to that piece of equipment. Now, which to use? As you can see here, we can use the notes to record what happened, or we can use a memo to record what's happened. I tend to lean towards using the memo, because with the memo, then I can do a memo listing on my service memo code, and I can get a listing of all the pieces of equipment that have had service applied to them, and I can see who and what was done, as long as I'm entering the information on the agreement or on the equipment. So that is actually the next piece here. We have equipment and agreement memo listings. If you are familiar at all with the memos that can be assigned to AP vendors, AR customers, and in 4.4 you can assign a memo to a piece of to an inventory item as well. You print them out the same way, and it has the same options as any other memo listing. So let's look at that, and we're going to look at getting my service listing by using my memo. So I'm picking my service, and here's what I get. So I can see for this particular piece of equipment, based on the notes that I made on the memo on May 31st, for agreement number 1, I tell it that the nozzle was left in a vehicle, was pulled from the hose and run over, and it was ruined. To me, this is better than the notes. The notes field can be used for other information, but this allows me so that I can see, based on a memo code, what has occurred. The same thing can be done with the agreements. When I made that service call on that particular agreement, I also added a memo for it and said what happened. So the next time the folks working at this location pull another nozzle off, I can add this here, I see under the service code then everything that's happened here, and then when I do an agreement memo report for my service memo code, I can see everything that has been done on this agreement to the equipment, which is really, I think, a great idea. But that's just me. On the agreement report is simply a listing of your agreements. They can be sorted by the agreement number, customer number, or by salesman. So it's pretty much the same, similar to the equipment report. This one just lists out the agreements. Like I said, it can be sorted by customer number or salesperson number. So picture this. You could choose salesperson, put a page break in, and then run it, hand it over to your salesperson and say, go check out these agreements and these locations and make sure that our equipment is still there and is still being used in the manner that we expect it to be used. The information that it prints is the information about the agreement, who it is, the ship to, who the salesperson is, the agreement date, whether it's active or inactive, the expected quantity volume. If you want to record the maintenance cost, you can come in and manually add that cost here, but it shows you the period to date, year to date, and life to date activity on the agreements. Probably the most important agreement of all, or report, sorry, of all, is the agreement performance report. This is the report you want to run. The products and equipment assigned to the agreement are displayed. The monthly gallons, projected gallons, and the actual gallons are displayed. And in addition to the gross profit percentage, the gross profit dollars are displayed. For those of you that have older versions, the gross profit dollars is something new that I also added to the performance report at the same time that I added the equipment and the products, because gross profit dollars are probably more easily understood than the percentage. You can choose to print the prior year information for comparison to the current year. You can also tell it a gross profit range to print. And if you choose $0 for both ends of the range, you will get a listing of your agreements that have not had any activity. A summary can be printed, a summary version, comparing the year-to-date totals to the life-to-date totals and giving a variance or the projected dollars, gallons that will be forthcoming or should be if they follow their agreement. So, on the reports menu, the agreement performance report. Again, we can choose by agreement number, customer number, salesperson number. If you intend on handing it out to your salespeople, you probably want to put a page break in there where you can then tear it apart and hand it out for their review. You can choose which fiscal year to print it on. Here's the gross profit range that I was talking about. If you change this one to 0, you're going to get a report that will show you those agreements that do not have activity. I'm going to print it for all agreements right now. And what you're going to see is my one agreement that I've set up here for the demonstration, as well as my equipment agreement for the main equipment at the warehouse. And then I also have an agreement for equipment that's been placed out of service, whether it's ruined, like my little nozzle, or maybe you've pulled a tank out in order to repaint it or do some repairs on it. So, what I would suggest, if you decide that you would like to use Sorry, got a thunderstorm coming and a dog is hiding under my desk. If you decide to use the yard agreements, give them a number, an agreement number that gets them out of the range of everything else. As you can see, I use letters, which will always put them at the end of the report. So you can do a report by a range, and I'm just going to pick my one little agreement. And this is how I get that performance report that we looked at earlier. If we want the summary version, then I can look at the summary only, and this is how I get this report. Year to date, life to date, the 24,000 gallons is the sales to the over the life of the agreement. That minus the life-to-date agreement total gives us our variance, or what is projected for the rest of the term of the agreement. Okay, things to consider. Take advantage of your consultant. They can help you to determine the best way to set up your system. Do you want to track the products generally, fuels, lubes, or more specifically, by the exact product? Or maybe groups of products. Break lubes up into a smaller group. How do you want to track your equipment? This is addressing equipment type. Do you want to just call it tanks, or do you want to break it down by size? Do you have multiple pieces of equipment? Do you want to have multiple pieces of equipment on your agreement, or just the main piece, the tank? Do you like having the an agreement to track what is in the yard and another to track what is no longer usable? It's a lot easier to talk all of this through before you start your setup than to get halfway through the setups, or even worse, start using the module and then find out you really wanted something different. Planning is everything. It's key. And I guess the next important thing is Equipment Manager is only as good as the information you put in it. You have to have some internal processes in place that would notify someone when you receive new equipment, when you put equipment out, when it gets moved, and when it gets serviced. The system does handle posting the sales transactions to the agreement automatically, but you're going to have to tell it everything else. Tracking the equipment isn't the hard part, but sometimes getting the information you need to track it is the hard part. And that is my presentation.
All right, Lisa, thank you very much. Before we open it up for questions, I'd like to invite everybody to attend our WebLink web portal webinar on July 11th at 11:30 Pacific Time, 1:30 Central Time, to learn how to free up your employees to grow your business while providing your customers and dealers with the convenience of accessing their fuel pricing, dealer EFT notifications, dealer credit card batch information, sales order history, open invoices, invoice history, and account information anytime, anywhere from any web-enabled device with our WebLink interface and our partner website pipelines web portal options. You'll also learn how you can give your customers the ability to order packaged products as well as pay their open invoices online by adding our optional shopping cart and online invoice payment with real-time credit card processing features. So I encourage everybody to mark their calendars to attend that webinar on the 11th. I will be sending out an invitation that looks exactly like you see on the screen here shortly after this webinar is over. On that note, we can open it up to questions. And the first question that came in is from Sean over at Interstate. Lisa, he is asking, what are the best practices or tips on successfully numbering pieces of equipment?
Well, I've seen it done several different ways. As you can see, how I did mine is I gave it a number that tells the equipment type, a hose, 25 meaning a 25 foot, and then gave it a number. Let's look at a tank. So like this is a 1,000-gallon tank, and it's number 2. You have fields for the vendor serial number. Some folks will use the vendor serial number for the equipment number, but those fields are available here if you want to number them as I have done. I think the advantage to doing it the way that I did it is that everything is automatically sorted by type based on this equipment number. So you can make up your own number, you can add your own serial number, you can use the vendor serial number. It's whatever really works the best for you. Since this was my idea, I kind of like this way.
All right. We can always count on Sean to ask some good questions. His next question is, what version of DM2 software does this work with?
Everything that I have shown you today is there in one form or another. This is the 4.4 version, which has been brought up to the new business framework, so there are some changes as to the way the screen works, but the essential information has not changed. This is everything that you see here under equipment and what you see under the agreement. That is what it is. This has not changed. What has changed is that the main thing that's changed is that the reports are now in Crystal. Before 4.4, they were the normal graphical reports, non-graphical reports that you could not make changes to without custom programming. I believe, I would have to double check, but I think that the interface to the AP, through AP, did not come until 4.4 either. But otherwise, everything else has been here all along.
Okay, thank you, Lisa. Another question from Sean is, how is the data stored in the back end? Is it the SOTA mass or SQL databases?
It's in the SOTA mass. There is a file for the agreements themselves, for the equipment themselves, and then there's a separate file for agreement transactions and a separate file for equipment transactions.
Okay, thank you, Lisa. And Sean's on a roll here. Another question from Sean is rough cost estimate, and he says we understand that custom may play a part in the quote. I can let you know what the list price of the module is. It's $4,698, and Lisa, you might want to touch on, a typical install time.
It shouldn't take but just time period for data gathering, like I said, in things to consider, to talk over with your consultant, what sounds best for you, how you want to set things up. We set up equipment type. I mean, you could have just an equipment type called tanks, or you can break them out according to size. which makes data out a little bit easier. You have to determine your product class. I did it clear diesel and bulk lubes are the two products. Some people will actually create a product class that is a one-to-one relationship to an actual inventory item because they want to look at it at the item level. Other people just care about the fact that it's bulk lubes and they don't really care what product it is. So those are the kind of the things that we talk about in the data gathering. Once you do that and then you have that set up, then it's just a matter of getting all the information together, which might be a task. It might be in a spreadsheet somewhere, or more than likely it might be a bunch of pieces of paper in a box somewhere. And then you've got to go through, you have to set up the equipment first, and then assign the equipment to the agreements with the customer. So the actual setup part, half a day maybe, once you determine what you're going to do. The rest of the time is spent on doing the actual setups. And that just depends on the number of agreements and the amount of equipment that you've got.
Okay, thank you, Lisa. Another question from Sean is this in the new framework programming structure?
Yes. If you have version 4.4, it will be in the new framework. Anything earlier than 4.4, I don't believe it. I believe it made it to the new framework in 4.4.
Yes, I think that is correct. Okay, another one from Sean is, what are the best practices for data entry? And for those who have been using this for a while, who is typically doing the entry into the system?
Well, usually they have a person who's responsible for it. Because then it's easy, the folks that are receiving the new equipment in, they can know who to go to and say, we got these 10 tanks in and so forth. And they're also responsible for setting up the agreements. It's not hard to set up an agreement. You just assign it a number, give it a description, and then assign it to a customer. You tell it what product they're going to get, and then you tell it what equipment you want to assign to it. Well, I have to move it. So. And then assign it to my equipment, my agreement. And then based on what the, I don't have it shipped to here, based on what the salesman has told you, you put in what your expected quantity is over the next, we'll say, a year. And the expiration date, I'm going to make it, if I have to make it May, that makes it be 12 months. Oops. And then if you want a penalty rate, that's it. So it takes you about a minute to set it up. And you can see that we've already got transactions for this agreement where we have installed these items to this particular agreement. So you can import. I've done it, but it's almost as much trouble to get it organized in a spreadsheet as it is to just actually come in and do it within the screens itself. Does that help?
We'll find out. Next question. This is actually from Chris over at TexCon, asking, do we have to reference an agreement number or equipment number in sales order to tie gallons/dollars to the agreement?
No. When you do a sales order, I'm going to pick my Brown Trucking, my order, and then I'm going to pick my Clear Diesel product. And at this point in time, once I pick the product, it knows based on the customer, the ship to, and the product that I put in, the agreement number is already there. So for normal sales of product, no, you don't have to reference it. It is automatically brought in. Now, if you bill a customer for service, replacing nozzles, banging out dents, propping the thing back up because somebody ran into it, I found out in getting ready for this demo that billing the service, you do have to come in and tell it what agreement to apply the service to. But for actual sales of product, you do not.
Okay. Another question from Sean. Can the field technician enter information while in the field, or does the information have to be entered in back at the office?
If they have a way to remotely access mass somehow, and they have the permissions to get into Equipment Manager, yes, they could. I guess my question, though, would be, do you really want them to, or do you want that information to flow to someone in the office who can ask questions and make sure that everything is entered in properly? Yes. Some folks don't want their truck drivers to be entering anything in on orders and that, so I can't see them wanting to let service tech wanting to put this in. But you know, if you've got the caliber of employee that you would trust to do it, certainly they can, as long as they can access it remotely.
Okay, and we did, for those of you who joined us for our cloud computing webinar, we did touch on how you can access your system through the cloud, through basically through any web-enabled device there. Next question is from Jesus over at Argendendigi, and I apologize if I'm butchering the company name there, but he is asking, when entering equipment to an agreement that's at a different yard, what product class would you use? Do you need to add one to save the agreement?
I'm assuming that, I think I heard the question as, if I have two different yards and I want to add a piece of equipment to yard B, and we've already got a product class for yard A, yes. You would either need a different product class or you would assign it to a different customer. For example, I set up my equipment out of service using the same customer that I did with my yard agreement. And when I did that, and with my yard agreement, I used the product class service. When I did my equipment out of service, I was going to use the same product. It won't let you because you've already got, that customer is already getting that product on another agreement. So I had to use a different product class. So to answer what I think your question is, if you use the same customer number for your yard accounts, then yes, you will need a separate product class for each yard agreement. Or you can assign them to different customers and then it doesn't matter. Did that sound like I answered your question?
If you could just put into the question window, Jesus, we can follow up on that if we need to. Next question is from Brooke over at McPherson. She's asking, is there a way to access an agreement without having to go into the AR module to search a customer? And the second part of the question is, does Equipment Manager have a search feature for customers, then which would list all the agreements below after you select that customer?
You can look up, if you know the customer's got an agreement, you can go to AR Customer Inquiry. You can go into Agreement Maintenance and do the lookup here, and you can sort by customer name and or number, whatever, to find the agreements that way. If you wanted to print out a listing for a specific customer, then under the Reports menu for the agreement report, you can tell it to give me every agreement that I have for Brown Trucking. And it would list every agreement that I would have for Brown Trucking. Hopefully that answers your question.
Okay, the next question is from Lisa over at Tyree. She's asking if she's on version 4.3, can they install the 4.4 version of Equipment Manager?
The answer to that is going to be no, because it's interacting with inventory. In 4.3, inventory is not in the new business framework, so it wouldn't be able to talk to the inventory version in 4.3. In 4.4, both inventory and equipment manager module are in 4.4 in the new business framework. So, sorry, no, the answer to that question is no.
Okay, the next question is also from Lisa. She is asking if they have data in a spreadsheet, can they import it into Equipment Manager, perhaps using Visual Integrator?
Yeah, you can. Visual Integrator does have data dictionaries for Equipment Manager. You just have to be careful and do it in the same order that you would if you were going to manually set it up. You would need to bring in your equipment first. Then you would need to set up to import in your agreements. And then you would have to import in its separate file the equipment and product types or product classes that are assigned to that agreement. So import in equipment, that's one step. Import in the main information to the agreement here on the main tab. That's another import. Then you would have to import in the product class, and then you would have to import in the equipment. So yeah, it can be done.
Okay. Next is a comment, more than a question from way over at Cardwell. She's saying at Cardwell we have our sales department assistant entering the information into the system. So that kind of goes back to what Sean asked earlier. Another question from Lisa is she's asking what is the new framework? Should they consider upgrading from 4.3 before installing equipment manager?
Um,
And I can take a crack at answering, describing what the new framework is. It's actually a business object-oriented programming structure that Sage moved to quite some time ago, and that we're moving all of our modules over. We actually just introduced our 4.5 version, and that there was a big addition to that. We moved the PetroLink module, which is kind of the core module for our system, over to the new business framework, and it's basically a 3-layered programming structure. You've got all of the Sage programming at the bottom, and then in the middle is what we refer to as a translation layer. And then you've got the DM2 programming laid on top of that. And the beauty of the object-oriented programming is that if we make changes to the modules that we develop, the translation layer, kind of as the term implies, translates that all back to the core Sage software. So we don't have to constantly go in and modify the Sage software. We have traditionally modified several of the modules to accept the information from the modules that we've created. So that makes it a lot easier, and what it should further translate into is when you have custom and you're upgrading, it should make moving that custom over a lot less programming intensive, which translates into a dollar savings when you go to upgrade. So hopefully that answers that.
in addition, you have been, if you are in version 4.3, the new business framework, the object-oriented programming started with the version 4. So when you had 4.05, the general ledger changed to the new business framework, and that's why the general ledger screens changed back then to the grid format. There was also a bunch of stuff under the hood that happened at that time to prepare for the rest of the modules. Then when you upgraded to 4.3, you got, let's see, AR, AP, and I think sales order were all in the new business framework. Now with 4.4, inventory PO came in as well. Moving up to 4.5, I think everything on the Sage side will be in the new business framework, and we will have almost finished bringing ours in. Cardlock, with the next release of 4.5 from DM2, will also be in the new business framework.
Yes, that's correct, Lisa. Thank you.
I'm just not sure when that's going to be.
Right. We're working on that right now. It should be shortly. Next question is from Jim over at Boswell. He's asking, do most clients use this going forward, or do they build the database on historical information?
That kind of depends on whether you've got it in a spreadsheet where it's easily accessible, or it's that pile of papers in a box that's hidden under your desk somewhere that or worse, you don't know where everything is and you've got to go do the research. I've seen it done both ways. People they will definitely start by adding new ones as they come along, and then they will work on getting in the older historical agreements that are still in effect into the system as they're moving forward.
Okay, thank you, Lisa. We are running out of time. We've got a few more questions, so we'll try and get to all those. So if you bear with us and spend a few more minutes with us, we'd appreciate it. Another question from Sean is, how does the equipment number correlate to the inventory number?
It doesn't, unless you are putting your equipment into inventory, which some people will do that as well. It's not going to be sold, so it's really not necessary to put it into inventory. So there really is no direct correlation because normally you don't set up the equipment in inventory. The product class now, on the other hand, can be, we can have a product class called clear diesel, which could encompass 4 or 5 different types of clear diesel. Normal clear diesel, the various different bio versions of clear diesel. Gas could be all grades of gasoline, or you could have a separate product class for unlead, mid-grade, and premium. You could have a product class called lubes that would be for any bulk lubes, or you could have a product class that is a one-to-one relationship to a particular item. That's it's entirely up to you.
Okay, we've got another question from Jesus. His question is, how is their service transaction captured in the equipment transactions? Do we create an item code for service?
Yes. There is first of all, there is, let's see, we tell the setup that we're going to assign a specific product line to any kind of service item. And then in inventory, you can set up like an install fee or equipment repair, and they have that product line on it. Then you just bill the customer for the particular fee or the charge, and remember you have to assign it to the agreement, and then it will relate it to the agreement, and it will relate it to the equipment that is on the agreement. So it's simply a matter of setting up the fee or the charge, pointing it to the service product line, and then billing the customer and telling the sales order invoice what agreement to apply that service fee to. And then the system takes over and applies it to the agreement and to any of the equipment that is on that agreement.
Okay. All right, another comment from Layover Cardwell is we have the sales department responsible for entering the data because they are the department that is setting the tanks up with the customers. Another comment from Sean saying that we answered his question. Another comment from Jesus that we answered his question, and he thanks us for that. And then one last question from Jesus is, how do you create the template for the agreement and import it into the module?
Okay. Well, I apologize for that. I guess I should have showed you that. It is simply a Word document. Oops, that's not. Sorry. Looks like I might have saved over it. All right, we won't have my nice pretty one, but so what you have are what we call tags for various different fields within the agreement. So customer number, customer name, customer address, ship to description, ship to address, a tag for the expected quantity, the penalty rate, expiration date, equipment type, serial number, and equipment description. We have documentation. I think there are a few more fields than that can be added, but then it's just a matter of putting in that verbiage that you want, and where you have a variable where the customer number or name or address can change on the document, then you would put in these tags, and it's what they call a merge field. And then you save it, and you save it in the home text out folder of the installation. And then when you go into Equipment Manager and do an agreement, it'll pull the data in. Now it's replacing the brown trucking with the green ranch. It's replacing the information on the gallons and the expiration date and the fee based on the green ranch. So it's pulling in, this corresponds to that tag for the customer number. This corresponds to the tag for the customer name, and this is the tag for the address, and so forth. So it's just a mail merge document, basically what it is. Hopefully that helped.
Thank you, Lisa. All right, that's it for questions. I want to thank everybody for spending a few extra minutes with us to get through the Q&A. I also want to remind everybody that today's webinar has been recorded. Once the recording is available, we'll post it along with a copy of today's presentation on the customer content page of our website and send you an email message to let you know when it's available to be downloaded. If you do think of any questions after the webinar or would like to find out more about Equipment Manager, please feel free to email us at sales@dm2.com. I want to thank Lisa again for doing a very thorough job. I want to thank everybody for their attendance, and we had some really great questions. It's probably one of the liveliest Q&A sessions we've ever had. So I appreciate all the interaction and the attention. So thank you again, everyone. That concludes today's webinar.